If you're anything like me, you also like to interact with 3D elements every time you see them on a site. So today I want to show you how to add those elements to your own website using a little library called Three.js. So the first thing you'd have to do here is download the 3D model that you want to use. I recommend using this website called sketchfab.com because they have a lot of free models there that you can just use as long as you give credits to the creator. Just go ahead and create an account if you don't have one yet. Be sure to always check the licensing information to make sure that you can use this module for the purpose you want to. Then finally just go ahead and download it in GLTF format. So now let's quickly jump into our code. Let's start by checking the index.html file. So here there's only two things that you really need. A div with an ID so you can refer to it on your JavaScript, and you need to of course import your JavaScript file. I'm also importing a CSS file here, but that's just to style things a little bit to make it nicer, but you don't really need that for Three.js to work. Now jumping over to our CSS file, here is very simple. I'm just setting the background to black, setting a little nicer font, I'm setting a header on the top of the page, and I'm also making the canvas element take over the whole screen. So now that we covered the basics, let's go over to our JavaScript file and get started. The first thing you need to do here is import Three.js. So I'm importing it in three different files. First one is the main Three.js library. Second one is arbit controls, so we can rotate, we can increase the size, we can change our 3D element in many ways. The third and last one is the GLTF loader, and we're going to be using it to import the GLTF file into Three.js. Next, we're going to be creating our scene object. Let me just quickly close the minimap here. And before we go any further, I want to explain a little bit of how Three.js works. So to render any kind of 3D element, there's three things that you're always going to need. A scene object, a camera, and a renderer. The scene object is like the 3D space, so you add your 3D elements to the scene. The camera is the point of view from where that scene is going to be rendered. The renderer is just what puts everything together and creates the element that's going to be added to the page. So moving on, we're going to initialize a object variable and a controls variable. I'm also initializing a object render variable. And that one is specific to my project, so you don't have to worry about it. Next, I'm starting a new GLTF loader, and then I'm loading my GLTF file into the project. The load function takes callbacks for success, loading progress, and error, specifically in that order. Now we create a renderer, and I'm setting the alpha to true so we can see the background instead of having a blank background or whatever background is set on the GLTF file. And I'm setting the size of the renderer to be the same size as the screen. I'll then append the DOM element property of my renderer to my container 3D div. I'm now setting the Z position of my camera, and I'm using a ternary operator here to change the Z position according to the object that I'm rendering. But if you're only rendering one object, you don't have to worry about that. For the positioning and the lighting, you're gonna have to play a little bit with the numbers to see what works best for your 3D model. I'm now going to add the lights that illuminate our 3D model. And if you don't add those lights, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, you're only gonna get a black screen. So if you're getting a black screen, just know that you probably need more lights. After creating each light, just add them to the scene. Now we have to create an animate function that's going to be called on every frame, and inside that function is where you're going to render your 3D model. Now let's add an event listener for resize. So if the user resizes the screen, we also resize the camera and the renderer. Lastly, just call your animate function.
I clearly forgot to add my renderer.render function inside the animate function, so I'll do that now. Also, don't worry about this extra code I'm also adding here. That's to make the eye model move according to the mouse's position. But more on that later. With the code we currently have, the models are already being loaded and displayed on the page, but they are not interactive at all. Users can't move the 3D objects and they don't react to any browser event. So how do we add that bit of functionality? Both example models that we are working on today will have different types of interactions. The dinosaur one will be draggable, rotatable, and zoomable by the user, while the eye will only follow the user's mouse position. So let's start by creating variables to hold the mouse's current position, and we'll initiate those variables at the exact center of the screen. Next, we will add orbit controls to the camera only if the object being rendered is the dinosaur. Orbit controls are a very useful part of Three.js, since it allows us to add camera controls in a single line of code. Now, do you remember the code that I told you not to worry about before? Let's take a look at that. This piece of code runs only for the eye model, and it rotates the model based on the value on our mouse position variables. Lastly, we just need to add an event listener to the document, so anytime the mouse moves, we can update our mouse position variables. And that's it. Now we have our fully interactive 3D models on the site. I hope you enjoyed watching, and if this video helped you in any way, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel to allow me to keep making videos. That's it for today, and see you next time.